This project is one that's evolved, and it started out with making a propeller for no other reasons than just for the fun of it and to display on the wall. In a totally separate project, I made a large wooden cog, which also ended up on my workshop wall. And then the idea came about to connect them together with more cogs and to get the propeller spinning. In my last video, I made another cog, and in this video, I'll make the rest of them using the same techniques and using plywood again. I made a few of the templates I need to get started, and I'll move through this next gear at a good pace, as I already showed the same process in my last video. If you haven't already seen that video and would like more detail, then you should probably watch that one first. In the last video, I was asked quite a few times what software I used to make the big templates with the grid. I just used Affinity Designer, and I made a grid to lay over the template and then chopped it up, overlaying the edges of each piece. Matthias Wandel has a great piece of software called Big Print that does this, but unfortunately it doesn't work on a Mac. There's plenty of different elements coming up, so stick with it. This cog is the next one in the gear train, so it made sense to make it next, and it just happens to be similar to the one in my last video, but we'll get through it quick and on to the next cog. That's the main layers done. Next it needs a rim on the top surface, and because this cog slides behind the big wooden cog, there isn't enough room to put a rim onto the back of it. I can't quite get a piece big enough for the rim from my scraps, but I do have this piece of 3/4 inch plywood. It's been kicking around for years. It came from my laundry cabinets that I built about 8 or 9 years ago. While I'm putting the first cog together, I'll take a moment to offer you a free set of my solid workbench plans. I made the same offer in my last video, and heaps of you already downloaded them. It's a fantastic workbench, it's easy to build and incredibly solid. If you're a beginner or a weekend hobbyist, these solid workbench plans were specifically designed to be extremely easy to follow. For a limited time, if you click the link in the description below, you'll be able to access my workbench plans for free and hopefully inspire you in your own workshop. While that's drying, I'll start the next cog, which is much smaller and attaches onto the big gear. It happens to be the same size as the original test gear that I made at the start of the project, just to see if I could mesh a gear to the original wooden one. And because it's the same size, I can use it as a template to make the next cog. This one is fairly basic, just lots of the same layers built up to make a solid cog, and because they're the same, I prepared them all first. On the bigger cogs, I had to use a jigsaw to cut away the waste between the teeth, but this one being smaller, I can do that on the bandsaw. I'll finish the large cog by trimming it up and then start building the layers up on the smaller cog. That's the main solid part of the cog done, so next I can make a rim for it. So far on the plywood cogs, I've cut a cove into the rims, but on this one I'm going to use a 22.5° chamfer bit. Before I glue on the rim, I'll drill some bolt holes in the cog. These will be just for show and look like the small cog is bolted to the larger cog, and will make it look more realistic. The first thing I'm drilling is recesses for washers and nuts to sit in, and while I have the 50mm bit in the drill press, I'll drill the centre bore through the cog. Next, I'll drill the bolt holes through, and because the point is much bigger on the larger Forstner bit, the smaller bit can't follow the divot made by it. So I put the larger bit back in, position and clamp the cog, and then change back to the smaller bit. I finished drilling all the way through, even though this ended up being unnecessary, which you'll see later on. That's starting to look pretty cool, but to add a bit more detail, I've made a disc-off camera that I'll glue between the two cogs, and I reckon this just adds a bit more depth to it. In the end, I decided to add a rim to the back of the big cog. It felt like the cog needed to be a bit thicker. I did that with 9mm plywood, and I'll have to make adjustments to how the large wooden cog is mounted, and that's to allow for it, but that should be easy enough. Because this is only 9mm ply, I didn't remove the waste before trimming it with the router, and it worked great. That's the cog just about done, so next I'll make a hub to mount it to the wall. So far I've made them from wood, but this one will be made from steel. I reckon it'll be better than the wooden ones, but the main reason is that the cog needs to be closer to the wall so it can be placed behind the original cog. I reckon it's looking pretty good. Next I need to do something with the hub on the wooden cog to bring it away from the wall, and it was an easy fix by just fixing a piece of plywood behind it. Even though the gears with different tooth patterns do work, I've decided to alter the wooden one and make them more efficient. The teeth are almost square, so I'll use a router with the 22.5-degree chamfer bit that I used earlier to take off the corners. I need something to support the router, so I made this simple jig to do that. It doesn't give much support, but it only took a couple of minutes to make, and it should work well enough. I was a little wobbly at first, but got pretty good at it after the first few teeth. Next, I needed to smooth out the transition. I tried a block plane, but I couldn't fit that in, so I ended up sanding it. It took a couple of hours to alter the teeth, but I think it was worth it. Next I need to make some sort of cap to hold the new cog onto the hub. That really wasn't welding well at all, and I didn't realise until I'd almost done it that it was because of a bad earth. To fix the cap on the hub, I'm using 6 screws. There's many ways I could do this, but this way's easy. It should look okay, and I can get on to making the next cog. That's working great so far. Hopefully it'll still work when the next cogs are fitted and it doesn't require too much force to turn them. I've already made a good start on the next cog. Now I need to add rims, and these ones are a bit different to the others and should look really cool. I'm going to take the template I used to cut the teeth and cut the inside of the rim from that to reuse as a template for these scallops. As long as it's pretty good, the inside of the rim doesn't need to be super precise. I used the first rim as a template to make the next one, lining it up as best as I could. I did round over the openings but decided I didn't like it, so I chamfered them instead. I made these centre discs and rings off camera, and I didn't show that because I've already made plenty of them throughout the project. But next I'll chamfer the rings on both the inside and the out, and again using the 22.5 chamfer bit. Next I'll add splines to the spokes, but I need to shape the ends to fit into the scallops. I'll make one and then I'll use that as a template for the others. I think this is my favourite cog so far. There's a fair bit of work to it, and next I'm going to add even more work. I've decided to add my name to the centre, and I'll do that by cutting it out of 3mm plywood on the scroll saw. I haven't used the scroll saw for some time, and I'm not best with it anyway. I started off a bit shaky, but I was going pretty well by the end. And the last pieces are a small centre disc, one for either side. I reckon it looks great, and the last cog I made off camera, as it was really quite basic and it didn't add anything new. This one gets attached to the back of the propeller, and I made the back of it hollow to accommodate the propeller hub. Now that they're all made, I'll do some sanding and put some finish on, and then we can install them and find out if the propeller spins. I undercoated them all first, sanding and filling in between coats to get a good base for the final finishes. I tried to build up around the lettering and create a fillet around the base of the letters to make them look more like a cast. I also used cork to add a fillet to any of the internal corners. They all had 3 coats of undercoat. Next I'll apply the rust effect paint, and I'll start with the base coat. It gets 2 coats of the base coat, and then when that's dry I'll apply the rust solution. It gets 2 coats of the rust solution, leaving it for 12 hours between coats. Here's a time lapse of the first hour and a half, and you can see that I spray it with water every now and then to speed up the rusting process. While the rust solution is doing its thing on those cogs, I'll start finishing the propeller cog, which doesn't have any rust paint on at all. Before I do put any finish on it though, I need to drill the bolt hole pattern, and I'll take that directly off the propeller mounting plate. This cog will just be painted then weathered with the same technique I used in my last video, just spraying on water and then from a distance lightly dusting it with black spray paint. The last thing to finish is the large cog, and I'm doing that with hammer finish. I was originally going to put the bolts all the way through the two cogs, but realised that the bolt heads would get in the way at the back. So instead I used a small piece of threaded rod, a washer and a nut glued together, and then I glued them in as they really are only there for show. I tried rusting the bolts, but it was taking too long, so instead they were painted with rust effect paint, and that was by my wife, Kath. I also did the weathering on this one as it was looking far too fresh and too shiny. Now I can start to install them, and I'll do the propeller cog first. The propeller hub is screwed from the other side of the wall, and I have my son Bradley up there doing that for me. That does feel a little bit tight, but it should loosen up, and it's better than having it loose and wobbly. I made the last hub slightly different, and I also changed the earth clamp, and it welded much better. I welded a cap to the end that has a threaded hole in the middle, and I'll screw a large oversized nut to that to keep the cog on. Here I'm finding the position of the hub by placing a couple of pieces of cardboard in the adjoining teeth of the cogs, and then with chalk on the end of a piece of pipe I'll mark the position on the wall. Next I can mark and drill the holes for fixing the hub. This is the back of the wall above my grinding room. There's a few extra studs that I've already put in, and I've just added these ones to fix the last hub to. I'm putting plenty of thread locker into the threads, and hopefully this will be enough to stop the nut from turning. If it does turn, then I'll have to make changes, but hopefully I won't need to. I think my favourite is the fully rusted one. Let me know which one you like the best and if you would have done anything different. And here's the moment we've all been waiting for. Will it turn the propeller? It works really well and it's really cool, but it is a workout. You really need to hang off the spokes of that first cog to get any sort of speed. I may attach a motor to turn it slowly, but I'll need to look into that as that's not really my area. I'm over the moon that it works at all, and I was never confident that it would. It's been a fantastic project. I've really enjoyed it, although I think I'm looking forward to doing something else. I've put the propeller and all the cog videos together in one playlist if anybody wants to view those again, or if you haven't already seen them. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.